Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New View podcast. My name is Mac.
And my name is Megan.
Come along with us as we dive into the world of competitive Irish dancing and beyond,
sharing perspectives, developing community, and learning from each other.
We hope you enjoy. All right, well, today we thought we would do a little follow-up conversation, just chatting about the post we did last week, which was talking about some of the different resources Megan and I both sort of draw on in terms of getting a little bit of extra inspiration or motivation for dancing, but could just be life in general. So we shared a few specific examples, and we're also kind of curious what other people like to use in terms of their sources of inspiration, but we thought we would just talk a little bit about the ones we wanted to share and that we find helpful. And yeah. So, Megan, what's the one out of that post that you've been really relying on the most recently?
That's a good question because I feel like I go back and forth between all of my go-to resources for inspiration and all of that, and you probably do too a bit. And new things kind of pop up for me like week to week, I'd say, but most consistently I would look to music, I think, for
Mhm.
inspiration, whether that's like dancing music on the Fesh app or just like non-dancing music in general. That's kind of my go-to to change my mood or like wake me up in the morning on the way to the studio. That's my easiest route, I would say, for a bit of motivation. But I also like a good podcast, and we shared this in our post, but the Finding Mastery podcast is like a really wonderful kind of more long-term source of inspiration, I think, because I mean, there's great new guests on the show every week, and I don't know about you, I know we both listen to it, but it just leaves me feeling inspired, and I like recall moments from certain episodes or conversations for weeks and months at a time. So that sticks out as a huge source for me too.
Yeah, I would definitely second that on podcasts. And I have to admit I was really on a big podcast sort of kick. And I guess maybe it sort of ebbs and flows with these things, but I was on a real kick, especially with Finding Mastery, but some other ones too. And then I kind of fell out of the habit with those. And then yeah, kind of got more into music for a while and whatever. But I think one thing that's cool about podcasts, and I don't, and maybe this goes for books too, but don't you find, you'll be listening to a podcast and they'll be talking about something that, you can really relate to, and it's just, you kind of are like, oh my gosh, that's so how it is for me too. And first of all, that's really nice hearing that, somebody, and it could be somebody in a totally different realm or discipline from you. I think there was one I was listening to somewhat recently, and then you listened to it as well. It was this, world champion, I think, rock climber, and hearing her story and then realizing that there's a lot of common threads and things that resonated with both of us. And it's kind of cool to me that there's these really common threads and relatable experiences across various disciplines. And then another thing I think is super cool about podcasts is they're such a great conversation starter for, you finish listening to the podcast and then you just find yourself in some sort of social setting or whatever. And yeah, there's small talk, which is fine. I'm super not really one for small talk. I don't really enjoy it. But I definitely do it a fair share. And it's kind of nice to have I don't know, you can feel like you can relate to somebody through something you heard on a podcast, or maybe somebody's telling you about something and then you kind of remember something that you heard in a podcast and you're like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I heard about I that totally reminds me of something I was listening to in this podcast." And then maybe they want to know the name of the podcast and then they go listen
Mhm.
to it and then it kind of ends up being this shared meaning, I guess, that
Yeah,
goes from.
it's like a really nice, like thoughtful thing to talk about, I think. And for those who don't know or haven't listened to Finding Mastery, it's with Dr. Michael Gervais, who's a sports psychologist, and he has like amazing athletes and individuals of all kinds on every week just for interesting conversation. That's kind of how I would summarize it. It's different every week, but I would say I finish listening to it every week and think like, wow, there are so many cool people in the world. And then I get to pass like what I learn on to someone else or get to talk about it with Mac or like you guys here right now. So it's
Totally.
it's fun for me. And like Mac was saying, you realize that all kinds of people throughout the world have this commonality. We all share some desire to like work hard and find a passion and find ourselves through sport or art or our
Your
career,
work or
whatever it
whatever. Yeah.
is. And that's just a wonderful human experience. And I think that podcast in particular does a really nice job of opening that up because we don't often realize how similar we might be to, let's say, like a rock climber or a tennis player.
Hmm.
I would go in, or I usually go into an episode being like, oh, I don't know anything about rock climbing. What is there to learn? And then I leave like totally fascinated with it. And it's not just the idea of rock climbing, but the mindset behind it and the lessons you learn through it and all of that. So I think there's just a lot to be learned when you
Are
listen
open
for a
to it,
little
kind
bit,
of.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. I'm curious because I know that my brain works a little, well, I think our brains work similarly, but I think that mine works a little bit differently to yours. So I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on this is like I find myself I'll, have listened to a podcast and, something really jumps out at me and sticks with me and, it stays with me for a while and there are like certain key things that I think have stayed with me consistently. But oftentimes I find myself sort of almost like for not, I guess, forgetting them or like losing sight of them. So do you ever like go back and re-listen to old podcasts ever, or do you just find yourself like listening to different ones like more
Yeah,
like finding new ones all the time?
I think I do a bit of both. I'll say for a little bit there was an episode of Finding Mastery that I listened to like multiple times because it was so interesting to me and kind of groundbreaking in terms of like changing your perspective or approaching things in life. I can't remember his name, but it was a surfer that was on the podcast. And I remember the first time I listened to it, I was like, wow, I should listen to this on like the morning of a competition. This would give me like some good energy. And I did for a little bit, just as like
Yeah.
I was getting ready. I kind of fell out of the habit just because you do and you find other things to listen to and keep busy with on a competition morning. But I went back to it for that same feeling of inspiration or connection and what it provided. And I think each time I listened to it, I got something different out of it. So that was kind of cool too. And I think
Yeah,
that's the
that's
cool part.
interesting.
That's how I kind of relate to music as inspiration. There are, of course, like dance tunes I love and songs I love to listen to that are like all-time favorites, but I find the more I listen to them, sometimes they sound the same, and other days I draw like different points away from them as like, oh, that's my favorite. Like, I've never noticed that or that, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting because I think we as people and dancers especially listen to music and dance music repetitively. We obviously do. And some days it sounds the same and other days it's like, wow, this is like strikingly beautiful. I think it just kind of, for lack of a better phrase, like hits different on random days, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of reminding me of this other phenomenon that I find is certain books, and I guess it's true for podcasts too, but like have you had the experience where you start reading a book and it's, I don't know, maybe it was recommended to you and you start reading it and you're kind of like, "Meh, I'm not really vibing with this. Like I kind of get it, but it's I'm not really vibing with it." And then you put it down, and then for whatever reason you pick it up again at a different point in your life. Maybe it's like a month later or 2 months later, and then for some reason all of a sudden it's just hitting you in a totally different way, and it's I don't know. I think that happened to me with a book that you recommended to me.
Well, and that's great that you bring it up because it happened to me too with something we shared in our post actually this week. The book called The Happiness Advantage.
Yeah.
It, I think one of the first times Mac and I talked, she was like, "Oh, I just read this great book or whatever, recommended it." I can't even remember at this point how it came up. And I was like, like I'll get to it probably. I think I had ordered it and was just looking at it for a month or so.
Mhm.
And eventually I just started reading it and I got super into it. And it took me, a couple chapters or whatever, like you're saying, to see maybe what you saw in it or find my own things. But
Mhm.
eventually, like, it really hit me in a deep and impactful way. And I've since recommended it to other people who I know it's also impacted. And I would say that book specifically has left me with a lot of like long-term things that I still do. So it's interesting that maybe deep down I knew I needed to read it, or the stars just aligned on the day I picked it up and it all worked out. But
Yeah.
it's interesting how things like that can have an impact on you and be inspiring long term, you know?
Yeah. And I sometimes I think there's something about that in and of itself that makes it more meaningful when I don't know, you were like, "Oh, I was meant to read this at this time." Like there's
Hmm.
something people have different ideas on fate and whatever, but sometimes I kind of like to I guess indulge in that belief of like, "Oh, like this was meant to be." Like this
Well, I think
makes it
I
feel
like to
more
think I
powerful
almost
too.
forced that with this example because I was like, oh, like Mackenzie recommended this book. It must be like life changing. And at first I was like, I could take it or leave it, you know? But then I got into it, and whether it was because you recommended it and I really wanted to like just read the book because you told me to, or I got really into it and connected with it, or it was meant to be at that time for me, it just, there's all kinds of different factors you can look for in
Yeah.
what you're using as inspiration. And I just think it's so interesting. And two, I think in the same kind of vein, it doesn't always work, you know? Like maybe if I were to rediscover this book again right now, it wouldn't serve the same purpose. Like, do you ever
Mhm.
find that in what you're using for inspiration or something you're finding quite motivating? I think maybe like with music, we might find the repetitive nature. You're kind of like, oh, I'm kind of at like a dead end here. Like it's not filling me up in the way it usually does. Do you ever feel that?
Yeah. Well, okay, actually, I had an interesting thought about this, and you're a couple weeks ago, and you're reminding me of it, is that I think music is really unique and funny in this way, and maybe this is a me thing, but I'm not sure. Is, if you're listening, like, let's say a new song comes out, whether it's a new tune on the Fesh app or, a radio hit or whatever it is it comes out and I'm the type of person like when it's new and I really like it, I'll just listen to it over and over and over again and I kind of
Hmm.
quote unquote wear it out. Um and yeah, I guess sort of one of two things can happen or maybe it's a bit of both, but um one thing that I find can happen is like it kind of like loses its magic a little bit after you've almost worn it out too
Yeah,
much.
overdone it a bit.
Yeah. But at the same time, if when you maybe like take a little bit of a break from it and then you come back to it, it's almost that it can have a new meaning and a new, I guess, power to it because of all the times you listen to it.
Yeah,
You
you've created
associate
the
it with
meaning
that,
around
like
it.
a meaning in that po point of your life. And maybe you've had a realization since then or whatever, and then listening to it again, kind of maybe it gives you nostalgia, or maybe it reminds you of something hard you got through, or maybe it reminds you of a certain person. And then it kind of can give you that feeling again in a new way,
Totally.
which
Yeah.
is kind of, I think that's like a really interesting thing with music, especially.
Well,
I
and just as
more than
you're
any other medium.
talking through this, I'm thinking like, wow, how have I never thought of this? As you're saying that, I was like, I should start cycling through my like motivation tools or my like resources for inspiration. I should kind of make that a habit instead of wearing one out to an extreme. I can cycle and get the most out of it, I guess. I mean, I'm trying to maximize here. That's kind of like my vibe in life is to do
Yeah.
the most as much as I can. But it would be interesting to see how that might work. But I could definitely see a place where, oh, like I'm in a podcast kind of mood for this
Hmm.
month. So I'm really gonna like lean into that. And when I get my fill, I'll move on to like this book I've always been wanting to explore
Hmm.
more, reread, and maybe I'll move on to music after that. Or even to say like, oh, I'll use it for different times in my day. Like for me, I need music when I'm feeling a bit tired to kind of wake me up, get me excited or motivated. So that's best in like the mornings or in the
Hmm.
afternoon on the way to the studio before I've been dancing.
Hmm.
But
Hmm. Hmm.
of course, like before bed, I'd probably read a nice inspirational book in order to like calm down and get excited for the next day, right? I
Yeah.
think it serves
Yeah.
its purpose at all kinds of times.
Totally. Totally. I think I'm having like a couple of different thoughts as you're talking through this. One of them is, you were talking about, okay, like cycling through things so they keep fresh and they don't lose their impact or whatever. Um, and I think that that's a really good strategy, and I think that that's like a cool thing to kind of play with. Another thought that I've had and definitely experienced is sometimes I realize that I'm just not in a season of inspiration, and it's like I'm not in the mood to get inspired, if that makes sense.
Mhm. It
And
just
it's
doesn't click, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to me that, and part of that is like a little unsettling. I don't really enjoy that feeling, but I think it's important to realize that your life does have seasons of more growth and less growth and more inspiration and less inspiration. And I think what you were talking about is like cycling through different things and maybe not needing them to give you that
Mhm.
crazy inspiration or whatever feeling all the time, but just kind of like, cycle through things and that you don't have to force them necessarily.
But
Um,
see what works, see what doesn't. And then, like you're saying, if there's a time where it's kind of a dry spell in terms of inspiration, maybe that's a good time to just let it be a dry spell because at some point that does rekindle in some way. Like I know we've both experienced this where you're just
yeah.
kind of not going through the motions, but you're just not feeling it in the way you usually do. And that for me causes like a little bit of panic at times, of course, because who doesn't want to be inspired and motivated all the time?
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah, you're
feels
like, why am I
awesome.
not excited to do this thing that I know deep down I
Yeah,
love
I know I
doing?
love
But
this, but like, what's
yeah,
wrong with me?
yeah,
But to take a moment and be like, okay, that's okay. Like, two things can be true at the same time. I can like
mhm,
still love this and work hard without feeling the same motivation and inspiration that I normally do. I can keep showing up, and that's gonna build some strength within me so that when I do feel it again, it's that magical kind of thing. And like you're saying, if you have it all the time, it's pretty hard to appreciate, right? You don't
yeah,
realize how beautiful
yeah,
it is. So it's only natural to have those kinds of seasons and moments and days and weeks and years even, but I can for sure empathize with and understand what it's like to go through that and wonder
yeah,
like what's wrong with me, what am I not doing, but
yeah,
that's just the beauty of how it works, unfortunately or fortunately.
yeah. And I do think it's like a fine balance of when you're in one of those phases of just feeling uninspired or unmotivated, or just you might be like going through a hard thing even. It's a balance of kind of honoring, I think, how you're feeling and just letting that be and not needing it to be something else. And
We're forcing it like out
yeah,
of
or
your
forcing it like in an unnecessary way. But then it is a balance of, doing the work to find the inspiration again and keeping your eyes just open to it, like not necessarily like forcing a way of finding it, but just like what does that look like to keep yourself open to it at the same time?
yeah.
Does that
And
make
for
sense?
me,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I mean, as you say that, I think for me, that would come in the form of saying, oh, like I'm just not feeling it right now, whatever that is, motivation, inspiration, joy for your thing. And that's fine. I can still love it and want to pursue it and work hard at this thing, but I'm not in my prime state of inspiration, and that's okay. But I'm still gonna listen to the things that normally get me excited. I'm still gonna read the books that I enjoy. I'm still gonna like engage with podcasts and things, not because I'm needing a solve for this. I don't need to be cured of this like lacking inspiration, but I'm open to it hitting whenever
Yeah.
it can, and
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, I have no real, I don't know, findings behind this, but I think when you become a bit more open to it and relaxed in terms of, okay, inspiration, motivation, all of this is going to ebb and flow quite a lot.
Hmm.
That's when you kind of hit your stride of just being comfortable in yourself and doing your thing and in your routine.
Yeah.
Does that connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I do think this is probably something we've talked about a fair amount without explicitly talking about it over the years, which is interesting to me now that we're having this specific conversation. Um, and as I'm reflecting on it, I think it's for me, it's just been something that has come with age, is just trusting that the inspiration or like the quote unquote good days or whatever, they are coming down the line if you continue to show up. And showing up doesn't have to mean, again, like we were saying, forcing it, but it's just kind of like follow your gut. Like if your gut is saying, no, like there's still something in this, I still love this thing. And if you keep turning up, the good days are coming down the line, the inspiration days are coming down the line. And I think when you're in the middle of one of those phases, it's like sometimes
It's
hard
hard
to
to see what's
keep
coming
the
and
faith that it
yeah.
is coming. But I think because I'm older, I've been through these phases so many times that like it's easier for me to trust
Yeah,
that they
and
are.
because it's true,
Yeah.
it's coming. And I think that's helpful. Like I'm glad we're having these conversations and I hope younger dancers or anyone is hearing this who hasn't had that experience. And not to say that we can guarantee it'll come or anything, but to know
Yeah.
that you can keep doing what works for you and trust that it will work eventually, whether it's today or tomorrow or next
Yeah.
year even.
It might grow like little by little, and or you might have a day where the switch just like flips again and you're having a great day. That's like kind of the cool thing about it is you don't necessarily know how it's going to come about, which yeah, that's exciting in and of itself. Um, but I think like that level of trust is important to have, and just trusting for the sake of trusting, like not because you have any evidence to prove that it's for sure. You just never know when like the next great day might be right around the corner. But just,
Mhm.
I don't know. I just like the idea of living my life that way and believing in those days coming rather than being afraid.
Asking for them, yeah, to
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
tomorrow. And I think too, just to connect it back to all of this, that's why I like having my helpful resources in terms of what's motivating and what's inspiring, so that when I really am craving it, I know where to go and what to rely on and what
Mhm.
can help me in those hardest moments. And then what works well every day and makes me feel good. And I think the more we kind of collaborate as like a whole community and learn like what we all enjoy doing,
Yeah.
we'll get so much out of it. That's really cool. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad we
I've
talked
loved
about
this conversation. I think this is actually, yeah. No, now I'm actually feeling inspired from having this conversation. But I think that's a really nice note to end it on is just, let's all keep sharing what inspires all of us. And it it these things might not universally work for everybody, but I think like just the more we talk about these things and share them, like you just never know what's
There's
gonna.
bound to be greatness
Yeah,
somewhere in this.
exactly. So, I mean, we've shared a few things that are inspirational for us. So, please feel free for everyone else to let us know what inspires you. But yeah, I think that was a super cool conversation. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and maybe you're that little bit more inspired from having listened.
That would be awesome.
Thanks for joining us in this episode of the New View podcast. We hope you enjoyed.
If you have any ideas about future guests we should interview or want to connect, you can find us on Instagram at newview.collective or email us at newviewcollective.mm@gmail.com.